The words hit me like a punch to the gut. She's too fat and boring for anyone else to want her. Once I get the cottage and her trust fund, I'm done with this charade. I stood frozen outside the boathouse door, listening to my daughter's fiancé laugh with his friends at our family's engagement party. The July evening breeze coming off Lake Muskoka suddenly felt ice cold against my skin. If you're watching this, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. This is my story of how I protected my daughter from the worst mistake of her life. It was supposed to be the perfect summer evening. Our family cottage, the one my grandfather built with his own hands back in 1947, sat perched on a rocky point overlooking the lake. The white pines towered overhead, and the smell of cedar mixed with the smoke from the fire pit where we'd be roasting marshmallows later. Sarah, my only daughter, was getting engaged to Marcus Thompson, a financial advisor from Toronto, who she'd met through her teaching colleagues. I'd spent the whole day preparing. I'd stained the dock, hung string lights between the trees, and set up tables on the lawn overlooking the water. My late wife, Catherine, would have loved to see this day. Her picture sat on the mantel inside, smiling down at the celebration she'd never get to attend. Lymphoma took her 3 years ago, and since then, it had been just Sarah and me looking after each other. The guests started arriving around 5 o'clock. Sarah's teacher friends came up from Toronto in a convoy of cars. Marcus's colleagues from the investment firm pulled up in their expensive German sedans, looking somewhat out of place against the rustic backdrop of the cottage. My neighbors from the other properties along the lake stopped by with casseroles and congratulations. Marcus had been dating Sarah for 8 months. He was tall, well-dressed, always saying the right things. He'd compliment my carpentry work, offer to help with chores around the cottage, talk about his 5-year plan, and his commitment to Sarah. Something about him never sat right with me, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was just a father being protective. Sarah seemed happy, and after losing her mother, she deserved happiness. Around 7 o'clock, I was carrying a cooler of drinks from the main cottage down toward the fire pit when I heard voices coming from the old boathouse. We'd converted it into a change room and storage area years ago. The door was slightly open, and cigarette smoke drifted out into the evening air. I recognized Marcus's voice immediately, that smooth tenor he used when charming clients. But the tone was different, mocking, cruel. "Honestly, mate, how long do you think you can keep this up?" another man's voice asked. I later learned this was Trevor, one of Marcus's university friends. Marcus laughed. 6 months, maybe a year, just long enough to get my name on the cottage deed and access to that trust fund her mother left. Her dad already told me about the estate planning. Sarah's the sole beneficiary of a $1.2 million trust that matures when she turns 30. That's in 18 months. My hands tightened on the cooler handle. The plastic cracked under the pressure. "But you have to actually marry her, right?" Trevor said. "That's a whole wedding to sit through." "Small price to pay for lakefront property in Muskoka and 7 figures in the bank," Marcus replied. "Besides, she's so desperate for approval she'll sign anything I put in front of her. I've already got her to add me as co-owner on her investment accounts, joint tenant with right of survivorship. Her financial literacy is pathetic for someone who claims to be educated." Another voice chimed in, younger, more hesitant. "But don't you feel bad? I mean, Sarah seems really nice." "Nice?" Marcus's laugh was harsh. "She's too fat and boring for anyone else to want her. I'm doing her a favor just by showing up. Once I get what I need, I'll find some reason to leave. Irreconcilable differences. She'll probably blame herself. These insecure types always do." The other men laughed. Someone clinked bottles together. I stood there, my 6'2" heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. The cooler slipped from my hands and hit the ground with a thud. The voices inside stopped immediately. "Did you hear something?" Trevor asked. I didn't wait to hear more. I grabbed the cooler and walked quickly back toward the main cottage, my mind racing. Every step felt heavy, like I was walking through wet concrete. How could I have been so wrong about this man? How could I have welcomed him into our family, into the cottage my grandfather built, into my daughter's life? I found Sarah near the fire pit, laughing with her best friend Jennifer. Sarah wore a white summer dress, her brown hair pulled back in a braid. She looked so happy, so full of hope. The engagement ring on her finger caught the firelight and sparkled. "Dad, there you are," she said, smiling. "Jennifer and I were just talking about the wedding. We're thinking next June, maybe right here at the cottage." Jennifer, a tall blonde woman who worked as a real estate agent, smiled at me. She'd been Sarah's friend since teachers' college. "This property would be stunning for a wedding, Mr. Pearson. The photos would be incredible." I pulled Sarah aside, my hand shaking as I touched her arm. "Sarah, honey, I need to talk to you. It's important." Her smile faded. "Dad, what's wrong? You look pale." "It's about Marcus. I just heard him talking in the boathouse. Sarah, he's using you. He said terrible things about you, about the cottage, about your mother's trust fund." Sarah's expression shifted from concern to confusion to something harder. "What are you talking about?" "I heard him with his friends. He called you. He said cruel things. He's only with you for the money and the property. He has you signing financial documents, doesn't he? Adding him to accounts?" Jennifer stepped closer, inserting herself between us. "Mr. Pearson, that's a serious accusation. Marcus loves Sarah. Are you sure you didn't misunderstand something?" "I know what I heard," I said firmly. "Sarah, please, you have to believe me. This man is dangerous." Sarah pulled her arm away from me. "Dad, stop. Marcus has been nothing but kind to me. He encouraged me to invest wisely, to plan for our future together. That's what couples do." "Sarah, listen to yourself. Why would you need to add him to your accounts before you're even married? That's not normal." Jennifer touched Sarah's shoulder. "Your dad has been alone for 3 years, sweetie. Sometimes widowed parents can become a bit possessive. They're not used to sharing their children's attention." I felt anger flare in my chest. "This has nothing to do with that." I heard what I heard. Marcus appeared then, walking up from the direction of the boathouse with Trevor and the other friend. His face was all concern, his voice gentle. "Is everything okay? Sarah, you look upset." Sarah turned to him, tears forming in her eyes. "My dad says he heard you saying terrible things about me, about using me for money." Marcus's face fell into a perfect mask of hurt confusion. "What? Mr. Pearson, I don't understand." "I would never." "Don't lie to me, boy," I said, stepping forward. I heard every word. The cottage, the trust fund, everything. Marcus reached for Sarah's hand. "Sarah, I swear to you, I have no idea what your father thinks he heard. I love you. I would never speak about you that way." Trevor stepped up beside Marcus. "Mr. Pearson, we were just talking about Marcus's client portfolio. Maybe you misheard something out of context?" Jennifer nodded. "That must be it. Financial terms can sound harsh without context." I looked at Sarah, pleading with my eyes. "Honey, please. I'm your father. Why would I lie about this?" Sarah wiped her eyes. Her voice came out small, broken. "I don't know, Dad. Why would you try to ruin the happiest day of my life?" Those words cut deeper than anything Marcus had said. I watched helplessly as Jennifer put her arm around Sarah and led her away toward the cottage. Marcus followed, throwing me a glance over his shoulder. For just a second, his mask slipped, and I saw triumph in his eyes. The party continued, but the joy had drained out of it for me. Guests whispered. I heard fragments of conversation. "Poor Sarah. He's always been overprotective. Can't let her go." I sat alone by the fire as the sun set over the lake, watching the water turn from blue to gold to purple. My neighbor Frank sat down beside me, a beer in his weathered hand. He'd known our family for 40 years. "Want to talk about it, Bill?" "They think I'm crazy," I said quietly, "or jealous, or possessive." Frank was silent for a moment, watching the fire. "Are you sure about what you heard?" "As sure as I'm sitting here." He nodded slowly. "Then you need proof, because right now, it's your word against his. And I'll be honest with you, Bill. He's smooth. People like him. What do I do? You document everything. You protect your daughter any way you can, even if she hates you for it right now." The party ended around midnight. Sarah left with Marcus without saying goodbye to me. Jennifer shot me a disapproving look as she helped carry gifts to the cars. I stood on the dock, listening to the loons call across the water, and made myself a promise. I would prove Marcus was lying. I would protect my daughter, even if it cost me everything. The next morning, I drove into Bracebridge and found a lawyer. Richard Chen had handled my wife's estate. He was a careful, methodical man in his 50s, with silver-rimmed glasses and a basement office that smelled like old books. "Bill, what you're describing is financial exploitation," he said, after I explained everything. "But without evidence, there's nothing legally we can do. If Sarah added him to her accounts voluntarily, even under manipulation, it's her right as an adult. So he can just steal everything my wife left for our daughter? Not steal, exactly. But yes, if he's joint on the accounts and something happens to Sarah, or if they divorce without a prenup, he'd have legal claim to half. And if she's added him to property deeds." He trailed off meaningfully. "What do I need to stop him?" Richard pulled out a notepad. Proof of fraudulent intent. Recordings of him admitting to the scheme. Documentation of him coercing her. Ideally, testimony from others he's victimized. "Can you get any of that?" "I can try." He wrote down a name and number. "This is Doug Morrison. He's a private investigator out of Toronto. Former RCMP. If Marcus has done this before, Doug can find it." I called Doug from my truck in the parking lot. His voice was rough, direct. "Mr. Pearson, my rate is $200 an hour plus expenses. I can't guarantee results, but I can guarantee effort." "What do you need?" I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. "Okay," he said when I finished. "Give me his full name, date of birth if you have it, where he works, and any other details. I'll start with background. Criminal record, civil suits, previous relationships. If this guy's a con artist, he's left a trail. They always do." Over the next 2 weeks, I barely heard from Sarah. She texted once to say she and Marcus were taking some space from the family drama. Jennifer posted photos on social media of the three of them at Toronto restaurants, at Blue Jays games, shopping for wedding venues. In every photo, Marcus had his arm around Sarah, looking like the perfect fiancé. I worked on the cottage to keep my hands busy. I rebuilt the front steps, replaced rotted boards on the deck, cleaned out the boathouse where I'd overheard that conversation. Every nail I hammered felt like a small act of defiance. Doug called on a Wednesday afternoon. "Bill, you were right to be worried. I've got something." We met at a Tim Hortons in Huntsville. Doug was a big man, maybe 55, with iron gray hair and the solid build of someone who'd spent years in physical work before moving to investigation. He slid a folder across the table. "Marcus Thompson isn't his real name," Doug said. "He changed it legally 4 years ago. He used to be Marcus Novak, and Novak has a history." Inside the folder were printouts, court documents, newspaper articles. My hands shook as I read. There was a woman in Vancouver, Stephanie Chen. They got engaged in 2019. She was a pharmacist, came from money. Marcus convinced her to invest in a real estate venture. It was fake. He took her for $200,000 before she realized what was happening. She filed charges, but he'd moved the money offshore. By the time the case went to court, most of it was gone. He got 18 months probation and an order to repay, which he never did. Then he changed his name and moved east. "Why isn't he in jail?" I asked. "White-collar crime, first offense, good lawyer. The system's soft on financial fraud, unless it's massive scale." Stephanie tried to warn people afterward, but he threatened her with defamation suits. She eventually gave up. "Did you talk to her?" Doug nodded. "Flew to Vancouver last week. She's willing to testify if it comes to that. She said Marcus has a pattern. He targets women who are vulnerable in some way. Lonely, insecure, grieving. He makes them feel special. Moves fast, gets control of finances, then disappears once he's extracted what he can." I felt sick. Sarah lost her mother 3 years ago. She's been struggling with self-esteem since she gained weight during the grief. He picked her perfectly. There's more. Doug pulled out another document. I found his real estate records. 6 months ago, Marcus bought a condo in Liberty Village, paid cash, $280,000. Want to guess where that money came from? How do you know it wasn't legitimate? Because his tax returns show he makes $90,000 a year as a junior financial advisor, and he's got $30,000 in student loans. The math doesn't work unless that money came from somewhere else. He pulled out photos. I've been watching the condo. He's not living there, but this woman is. The photo showed a young woman, maybe 25, leaving the building with shopping bags. Her name's Ashley Porter, works as a dental hygienist. I talked to her neighbor. She thinks Ashley's boyfriend owns the place. Guess who's been spending nights there when he tells Sarah he's working late? The evidence kept piling up. Bank records showing Sarah had transferred $50,000 to a joint account with Marcus. Property documents where she'd signed over partial ownership of the cottage. Documents I'd never seen and she'd never told me about. Registration papers for a boat Marcus bought in both their names, using her money. He's systematic, Doug said. Everything's legal on paper because she signed willingly, but it's all based on fraud. The question is, can we prove the fraud before he gets the rest? The wedding's in 3 weeks, I said. She's planning it for early September. At the cottage. Doug leaned back. Then we have 3 weeks to stop it. Here's what we need. We need him on tape, admitting what he's doing. And we need Sarah to see it before she walks down that aisle. How do we get him talking? Leave that to me. But Bill, you need to be prepared. When this comes out, it's going to devastate her. She's going to feel betrayed, humiliated, angry. Some of that anger will land on you for being right. I don't care about that. I just want her safe. Doug closed the folder. Good, because we're about to blow up her world. The plan was simple but risky. Doug would approach Marcus posing as an investment client. He'd set up a meeting at a downtown Toronto restaurant, somewhere public but loud enough that Marcus wouldn't worry about being overheard. Doug would wear a wire. He'd get Marcus talking about money, about deals, about his philosophy on relationships and wealth. Men like Marcus loved to brag when they thought they were among fellow sharks. The meeting was set for a Friday evening. I sat in my truck in the Tim Hortons parking lot in Bracebridge, my phone on speaker, listening to the live feed Doug was transmitting. Marcus's voice came through, smooth and confident. So, Doug, what kind of investment horizon are we talking about? Are you looking for aggressive growth or steady income? Doug played his part perfectly, the slightly naive businessman with money to invest. Honestly, Marcus, I'm more interested in your philosophy. My buddy Trevor said you're not like other advisors, said you know how to really maximize opportunities. Trevor said that? Marcus laughed. Well, Trevor knows I believe in being strategic. Sometimes the best opportunities aren't the obvious ones. Like what? Like understanding that the biggest transfers of wealth don't happen in markets. They happen in relationships, marriages, divorces, inheritances. If you position yourself right, you can benefit from those transfers. Interesting. So you're saying, what, marry rich? Marcus laughed again. I'm saying understand the game. Look, I'm getting married in a few weeks. My fiancé, sweet girl, teacher, comes from old Ontario cottage money. Her family's property alone is worth $2 million, and she's got a trust fund maturing soon. I've spent less than a year positioning myself, and I'll have access to all of it. Does she know that's your plan? Of course not. She thinks I'm madly in love with her. His voice dripped with contempt. She's insecure, overweight, desperate for validation. I tell her she's beautiful. I listen to her boring stories about her students. I pretend to care about her dead mother's recipes. It's tedious, but it's an investment. You put in the hours, you get the return. What about after the wedding? I'll stick around long enough to consolidate the assets. Then I'll develop a wandering eye. She'll probably blame herself, maybe go to therapy, eventually sign divorce papers that I'll have my lawyer structure to my advantage. By this time next year, I'll own half a cottage in Muskoka and have access to over $1 million in liquid assets. Not bad for a year's work. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. Doug's voice stayed calm. And you're not worried about her father? Trevor mentioned he was suspicious. The old man? Marcus scoffed. He's a retired carpenter, lives alone in the woods. Everyone thinks he's paranoid. I've already got Sarah and her friends convinced he's being possessive and controlling. Besides, what's he going to do? He has no proof of anything, because everything I've done is technically legal. She signed every document. She transferred every dollar. I'm just a loving fiancé helping his future wife with financial planning. That's brilliant, Doug said. How'd you get so good at this? Practice. I did something similar in Vancouver a few years back. Learned from my mistakes on that one. This time, I'm being more careful. No obvious fraud, everything consensual. Establish the narrative early that anyone who questions me is just jealous or crazy. Doug got another 20 minutes of conversation, including Marcus bragging about the condo he'd bought with money from a previous scheme, about Ashley waiting for him to wrap up this project so they could be together full-time, about how he'd already lined up a post-divorce girlfriend so the transition would be smooth. I listened to every word, rage and heartbreak mixing in my chest. This man had calculated every step. He'd studied my daughter like a predator studies prey, found her weaknesses, exploited her grief and loneliness, and he was proud of it. After the recording session, Doug met me back in Bracebridge. He handed me a USB drive. That's everything. It's admissible in court because I got him in a one-party consent conversation. He had no expectation of privacy in a public restaurant. Richard can use this. What about Sarah? I asked. How do I show her? Carefully. You don't just drop this on her. You need the right moment, the right setting, and you need support around her because she's going to fall apart. I thought about it all weekend. The wedding was 2 weeks away. Invitations had been sent. Sarah had bought her dress. The cottage was booked. Caterers were hired. How could I blow all of that up without destroying my daughter in the process? The answer came from an unexpected source. On Monday morning, I got a call from Jennifer. Mr. Pearson, it's Jennifer, Sarah's friend. Can we talk? We met at a coffee shop in Gravenhurst. Jennifer looked different than she had at the party. Tired, worried. I owe you an apology, she said immediately. I defended Marcus. I told Sarah you were being paranoid. But something happened this weekend that made me realize you might be right. What happened? Marcus asked me to list the cottage. He wanted a market evaluation, said he and Sarah were thinking about selling it after the wedding to invest the money elsewhere. He made me promise not to tell Sarah yet because he wanted it to be a surprise. He said she was too emotionally attached to the property to make rational decisions. He's planning to sell my family's cottage? That's what he said. But here's the thing. He asked me to prepare the paperwork with just his name on the listing agreement. He said Sarah had already signed power of attorney to let him handle the sale. But when I asked to see it, he got defensive. Said it was with his lawyer. Something felt wrong. I showed her the folder Doug had compiled. I played her excerpts from the recording. I watched her face go pale as she listened to Marcus describe manipulating her best friend. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I helped him. I told Sarah she was lucky. I said you were being overprotective. I helped him isolate her from you. You didn't know. I should have. I'm her best friend." Tears started rolling down her face. "We have to tell her. Right now. We need to be smart about this. She's not going to want to believe it." Jennifer wiped her eyes. "Then we make her believe it. We show her everything. And we do it together, so she knows it's not just you." We decided to do it that evening. Jennifer texted Sarah asking to meet for dinner at the cottage. Just the three of us. Sarah was reluctant at first, but Jennifer insisted. I drove out to the cottage early to prepare. I set up my laptop on the dining room table. I printed out the documents. I had the USB drive ready. My hands shook as I made coffee, knowing that what I was about to do would either save my daughter or cost me her forever. Sarah arrived at 7, Marcus dropping her off. He didn't come in, just waved from the car. Sarah looked annoyed. "Dad, what's this about?" Jennifer said it was urgent. Jennifer arrived 5 minutes later. We sat Sarah down at the table. "Sarah, honey, I need you to listen to something," I said. "And I need you to keep an open mind. Dad, if this is more conspiracy theories about Marcus, it's not theories, it's facts. Jennifer's here because she's heard them too. Just please, listen." I pressed play on the recording. Marcus's voice filled the cottage. My fiancé, sweet girl, teacher, comes from old Ontario cottage money. I've spent less than a year positioning myself, and I'll have access to all of it. Sarah's face went white. She's insecure, overweight, desperate for validation. I tell her she's beautiful. It's tedious, but it's an investment. Tears started streaming down Sarah's face. I'll stick around long enough to consolidate the assets. Then I'll develop a wandering eye. Sarah stood up suddenly, knocking over her chair. Turn it off! Turn it off! Jennifer caught her before she could run. Sarah, I know this hurts, but you need to hear all of it. You need to see what he really is. We showed her everything. The documents from Vancouver, Stephanie's statement, the photos of the condo, the bank records showing how he'd systematically extracted her money, the property papers where she'd unknowingly signed over partial ownership of the cottage. Sarah collapsed on the couch, sobbing. Jennifer held her while I sat helplessly, my heart breaking for my daughter. I'm so stupid, Sarah kept saying. I'm so stupid. No, I said firmly. You're not stupid. You're kind. You're trusting. You love someone, and he took advantage of that. That's not your fault. He said he loved me. He said I was beautiful. He said she couldn't finish, overcome by sobs. We stayed up most of the night, Sarah cried. She raged. She went through denial, anger, bargaining, depression in rapid cycles. Around midnight, she finally asked the question I'd been dreading. What do I do now? We call Richard Chen tomorrow, I said. We get legal protection for your assets. We file for restraining orders if necessary. And we cancel the wedding. Everyone's going to know. Everyone's going to think I'm pathetic. Jennifer squeezed her hand. Everyone's going to think you're brave. You're stopping this before it got worse. I signed so many papers. He has access to everything. We'll fix it, I said. Richard can help. We'll freeze accounts, revoke authorizations, file complaints with his regulatory body. He won't get away with this. Sarah looked at me with red, swollen eyes. Dad, I'm sorry. I should have believed you. I should have listened. I pulled her into a hug. This grown woman who was still my little girl. All that matters is you're safe now. That's all that's ever mattered. The next morning, we met with Richard Chen. He immediately filed emergency motions to freeze the joint accounts and prevent Marcus from accessing the cottage or any other shared property. He contacted Marcus's employer with the evidence of misconduct. He reached out to Stephanie in Vancouver about pursuing renewed charges. Marcus called Sarah 17 times that day. She didn't answer. He showed up at her Toronto apartment that night. She'd already moved out, staying at Jennifer's place. He sent texts that went from pleading to threatening. Sarah, please, let me explain. That recording was taken out of context. You're making a huge mistake. We can work through this. If you embarrass me like this, you'll regret it. I know things about you. Jennifer screenshot everything and sent it to Richard. The wedding was supposed to be on September 10th. Instead, on September 10th, we were in court. Richard had assembled an airtight case. The recordings. Stephanie's testimony via video link from Vancouver. Doug's investigative report. Bank records. Property documents. Marcus's own threatening texts. The courtroom in Bracebridge wasn't large, but it felt massive and imposing with its wood paneling and high ceilings. Sarah sat beside me, Jennifer on her other side. Marcus sat across the aisle with his lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman from Toronto who looked like she wished she was anywhere else. The Crown Attorney, a woman named Patricia Walsh, stood and began presenting the evidence. She played the recording of Marcus admitting to his scheme. The courtroom fell silent, except for his voice. She's insecure, overweight, desperate for validation. I watched Marcus's face turn red. He whispered urgently to his lawyer. Stephanie testified next. Marcus Novak, or Marcus Thompson as he calls himself now, is a practiced con artist. He targeted me after my father died. He love-bombed me, isolated me from friends who questioned him, and systematically stole $200,000 before I realized what was happening. When I tried to hold him accountable, he threatened and harassed me until I gave up. I'm here today to make sure he doesn't do to Sarah what he did to me. The defense tried to argue that the recording was entrapment, that the relationship was genuine, that Sarah had signed documents of her own free will. But every argument crumbled under the weight of evidence. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Justice Hammond, listened to everything before calling a recess. When we returned, her ruling was swift. Mr. Thompson, or Mr. Novak, you have engaged in a pattern of predatory behavior that this court finds reprehensible. While some of your actions exist in legal gray areas, your intent to defraud is clear. I'm issuing a restraining order, preventing you from contacting Miss Pearson. I'm ordering all jointly held assets returned to her sole ownership. I'm referring this case to the RCMP for potential criminal fraud charges. Additionally, I'm ordering you to pay Miss Pearson's legal fees and compensatory damages of $100,000 for emotional distress. Marcus stood up, shouting, "This is insane! She wanted to put me on those accounts. She begged me to help her with the cottage." The judge banged her gavel. "Mr. Thompson, sit down or I'll add contempt to your growing list of problems." Security guards stepped forward. Marcus's lawyer pulled him back down, whispering urgently. "Furthermore," Justice Hammond continued, "I'm issuing a warrant for your arrest, pending investigation of criminal fraud. Bailiff, please take Mr. Thompson into custody." The courtroom erupted. Sarah grabbed my hand, squeezing tight. Jennifer was crying. I watched as Marcus, the man who'd planned to steal everything from my daughter, was handcuffed and led away. He looked back at Sarah one last time. "You'll never find anyone else. You're nothing without me." Sarah's voice rang out, stronger than I'd heard it in months. "I already have someone who loves me. My dad." Those words hit me harder than anything else that day. I wrapped my arm around my daughter as Marcus was taken through the side door, still shouting. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. News of the case had spread. Financial advisor accused of romance scam. Con artist targeted grieving teacher. I shielded Sarah from the cameras as we made our way to my truck. We drove back to the cottage in silence. The September afternoon was perfect. The kind of day my wife Catherine had loved. The leaves were just starting to turn, splashes of red and gold among the green. The lake was calm, reflecting the sky like a mirror. Sarah and I sat on the dock, our feet dangling over the water. "I can't believe I almost married him," she said quietly. "But you didn't. That's what matters. I gave him so much, Dad. Money, trust, access to Mom's cottage. I feel like an idiot. You gave him what any person in love should give. Trust and faith. The fact that he abused that doesn't make you an idiot. It makes him a criminal." She was quiet for a long time, watching a loon dive and resurface. "Did Mom ever tell you about the time I was 7 and I tried to run away from home?" I smiled. "You packed your backpack with stuffed animals and made it halfway down the driveway before you came back. Mom found me sitting on the curb, crying. She asked why I came back. I said because I knew I was safe at home. She told me that no matter how far I went, how old I got, home would always be safe." Sarah's voice cracked. "I forgot that. When Marcus came along, I thought maybe he could be home, but he wasn't. This is," she gestured at the cottage, the lake, the trees. "You are." I put my arm around her shoulders. "And I always will be." Over the next month, the legal process continued. The RCMP charged Marcus with fraud over $5,000 and criminal breach of trust. His ex-employer fired him and reported him to financial regulatory authorities. Ashley, the dental hygienist, came forward saying Marcus had conned her too, using money from his schemes to wine and dine her while promising a future together. Sarah started therapy to work through the betrayal. Jennifer and I helped her rebuild her finances and her confidence. The cottage ownership was restored entirely to Sarah, and she had new legal safeguards put in place. 6 months after the court case, on a cold March afternoon, we got the news. Marcus had pleaded guilty to avoid trial. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to both Sarah and Stephanie. Sarah and I were having coffee at the kitchen table when Richard called with the news. After I hung up, Sarah sat quietly for a moment. 4 years, she said. "Is that enough?" "Is any amount of time enough?" I replied. "He stole money, But worse, he stole your trust. You can't measure that in years. I guess not. She sipped her coffee. Jennifer asked if I want to go to a teachers' conference next month. There's going to be workshops, networking. She thinks I should meet people. Do you want to? I don't know if I'm ready. What if I meet someone and I can't trust them? What if I see Marcus in every nice thing they say? I reached across the table and took her hand. Then you take it slow. You trust your instincts. You let people earn your trust instead of giving it away. And you remember that what happened with Marcus was the exception, not the rule. Most people are decent. How do you know? Because I've lived 62 years, and I've met a lot of people. Some are bad, but most are just trying to do right by the people they love. Look at Jennifer. She recognized her mistake and helped fix it. Look at Doug and Richard. They helped a stranger because it was the right thing to do. Look at Stephanie, who flew across the country to make sure you didn't suffer like she did. The world has more good than bad, honey. You just had the misfortune of running into some bad. Sarah smiled. The first real smile I'd seen from her in months. When did you get so wise, old man? When I became a dad. It's in the job description. That summer, we held a party at the cottage. Not an engagement party this time. Just a celebration of family and friends and survival. Jennifer came up from Toronto with her new boyfriend, a gentle accountant named Paul who made her laugh. Stephanie flew in from Vancouver, and she and Sarah bonded over their shared experience. Frank and the other lake neighbors stopped by. Doug Morrison came up with his wife, and we toasted his investigative skills. Sarah stood on the dock at sunset, the same dock where she'd almost pledged her life to a con artist, and raised her glass. "To my dad," she said, her voice carrying across the water, "who loved me enough to risk everything to save me, who never gave up, even when I didn't believe him, who showed me that real love protects, not exploits." Everyone raised their glasses. I felt tears in my eyes. "And to everyone here," Sarah continued, "who helped us through the darkest time, who proved that good people still exist, thank you." As the sun set over Lake Muskoka, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I thought about everything we'd been through. The pain, the betrayal, the legal battles, but also the healing, the growth, the bonds that had been tested and proven strong. Marcus had tried to destroy my daughter. Instead, he'd given her the greatest gift, the knowledge of her own strength. She'd faced the worst betrayal and survived. She'd learned to spot manipulation and defend herself. She discovered that she was worth fighting for, and I'd learned that being a father doesn't end when your kids grow up. Sometimes the most important moments come when they're adults, when they face challenges you can't shield them from, when all you can do is stand beside them and refuse to give up. That night, after everyone had left and Sarah was asleep in her childhood bedroom, I sat alone on the porch. The cottage creaked in the familiar way it had for 77 years. The lake lapped gently at the shore. An owl called from the pines. I thought about my wife, Catherine, and I hoped she knew that I'd protected our daughter the way we'd always promised we would, that I'd fought for her when she couldn't fight for herself, that the cottage she loved, the family she cherished, was safe. And I thought about Marcus, sitting in a prison cell, and I felt no satisfaction in his punishment, only relief that he could never hurt my daughter again. The sweetest revenge wasn't seeing him in prison. It was seeing Sarah free, standing on that dock, raising a glass to life and love and second chances. It was knowing that she would be okay, that she was stronger for having survived, that she knew the difference between someone who claims to love you and someone who proves it through action. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in Sarah's story, please know this. You are not stupid for trusting. You are not weak for loving. You are not to blame for someone else's cruelty. But you deserve to be protected, to be cherished, to be with someone who sees your value. And if you're a parent watching your child walk into danger, don't give up. Don't stop fighting. Your instincts are there for a reason. Trust them. Document everything. Find allies. And never, ever apologize for protecting the people you love. Thank you for listening to my story. May you never have to face what we faced. But if you do, may you have the strength to fight back And may you remember that love, real love, doesn't manipulate or exploit. It protects, it endures, it saves. God bless you and your families. Stay safe out there.